I keep thinking about the box of glass sitting in the back of your kitchen cabinet right now, the one you have half decided to donate the next time you clean out that shelf. Some of what's in there is worth exactly what you think it's worth, a couple of dollars, maybe nothing at all, but some of it isn't. I've spent a long stretch of nights buried in old auction records for this, more nights than I'd like to admit, honestly, and what I found kept surprising me. Piece after piece that looks like nothing and sells like something. 10 types of glass sitting in ordinary American kitchens have quietly sold for hundreds of dollars, some of them well into the thousands, and the strange part is, the ones worth the most are usually the ones you'd assume are worth the least. Start with the pink and green glass, thin, a little cloudy, the kind that feels almost too light in your hand, like it might crack if you look at it wrong. That's depression glass, and it earned its name honestly. Companies pressed it by machine during the 1930s, so cheap that grocery stores dropped a piece into a box of oats just to get you to buy the oats. Imagine that happening today, a bank giving away a car with every mortgage. It was never meant to last, which is exactly why so much of it didn't, and why the pieces that survived in good color and good condition are worth chasing now. A matched set in the right shade of pink or a rare cobalt blue has sold for $300 and up, sometimes well past $1,000, while the common green and clear pieces sit closer to 10 or 20. Nothing to write home about, but also nothing to feel bad about checking. The tell is light, quite literally. Hold a piece up to a window and look for tiny bubbles trapped inside the glass, and check how evenly the color runs all the way through. A flat, streaky color usually means a later reproduction, not the real thing, and reproductions, as you'll hear me say more than once tonight, have a way of ruining everyone's fun. And once you start noticing color, you start noticing shine, which brings me to a kind of glass that looks almost like an oil slick, caught the light just right. Carnival glass got its name because it used to be handed out free at fairgrounds in the early 1900s. Pressed glass sprayed with a metallic finish to make it look like it cost more than it did, which is either clever marketing or an early ancestor of the influencer economy. Take your pick. Most of it still sells for $20 or $30 today, which is fair because most of it is common. But the rare colors, red especially, or an aqua opalescent finish, have sold for well over $1,000 at auction. Tilt a piece under a lamp and watch how many different colors shift across the surface as it moves. The more it shifts, the more it's worth paying attention to. It's oddly satisfying to do, honestly, like a tiny light show you've had sitting on a shelf the whole time. Now here's where people usually get it backward, and I mean that in the most understanding way possible, because I'd have gotten it backward too before I started digging into this. White glass, the plain, opaque kind, shaped like hens or hobnail bowls, gets written off as either too modern to matter or too plain to bother with. But real antique milk glass from the late 1800s carries a faint gray or yellow tint that new glass simply doesn't have, and certain patterns in that older tint have sold for $200 to $400. Set it beside anything you know for certain is new. If yours looks even slightly off-white by comparison, that's not a flaw. That's your first real clue, and also possibly your excuse to finally clean that hen dish you've been avoiding. I want to slow down here, because the next one sounds almost too strange to be true, and I understand if you don't believe me yet, because I didn't either the first time someone told me. There's a pale yellow-green glass called vaseline glass that actually contains a small amount of uranium added generations ago simply for the color, long before anyone thought twice about putting radioactive material in a butter dish. It's completely safe to keep in your cabinet, so no, you don't need to evacuate the kitchen, but it does something no other glass on this list does. Take it into a dark room and shine a blacklight on it, And if it's the real thing, it glows a bright, unmistakable green, the kind of green that makes you understand why people get a little obsessed with this stuff. Pieces in good shape have sold for several $100s, and that glow is the one test on this whole list you don't even need good lighting for. Just a dark room and a $5 black light, and suddenly your kitchen cabinet is doing its best impression of a science experiment. From there, color gets even more specific and a little softer. Soft jade green kitchenware from the 1930s through the 1950s. The mixing bowls and mugs and canisters your grandmother probably still had on rotation. Everyday pieces run $20 to $60. Nothing dramatic. But certain patterns from specific makers, especially complete mixing bowl sets in strong, even color, have sold for $600 and climbed past $1,000. Check the base for a maker's mark and pay attention to how saturated the green actually is. The deeper and more even the color, the more likely you're holding an earlier production run, and earlier, on this list at least, is almost always where the real money sits. Here's something I genuinely didn't expect to find until I was several nights deep into this. A deep pink-red glass called Cranberry glass gets its color from actual gold mixed into the molten glass while it was still being made, which is part of why it was expensive, even brand new, gold, in your glassware. And you've probably been using it to hold pens. Pitchers and vases in this color have sold for $200 to $500. Hold a piece to the light and look for subtle streaking or slight variation in the red. If the color looks perfectly flat and even across the whole piece, that's usually the sign of a modern copy, not the original, and not the gold either, unfortunately. And that's not even the one most people get wrong the worst. Amber glass gets dismissed almost automatically, and honestly, I get it. The color reads as dated rather than valuable, the kind of thing that quietly disappears into the back of a cabinet and stays there for decades holding absolutely nothing. But complete amber sets from certain patterns, especially in less common shapes like a raised serving bowl on a stem or a covered candy dish, have sold for $300 and up. Check the base for a maker's mark and see if the lid that belongs with it is still there. A complete piece with its original lid is worth several times more than the same piece alone, which is a pattern you're going to see again before we're done tonight, so keep that thought in your back pocket. Then there's the piece almost nobody thinks to check at all, mostly because it's either being used every single day or completely ignored. A raised glass pedestal cake stand, the kind that either gets used constantly for birthdays or gets shoved into a top cabinet and forgotten entirely until the next one rolls around. Antique pressed glass stands, particularly in colored glass, have sold for $100 to $300. Run your finger along the pedestal and look for a single clean seam line. One clear seam usually signals older, more desirable pressed glass, while a rougher, more obvious seam tends to point to a later reproduction, the kind made in a factory that's never heard of your grandmother. Punch bowls are where this whole list starts to turn on one idea I need you to actually hear, and it's the biggest one so far. A full glass punch bowl with its matching cups feels like something nobody uses anymore, and honestly, when's the last time anyone you know served punch? But that's exactly why complete sets get broken up, sold piece by piece, or donated whole for almost nothing. A complete set, bowl, base, ladle, every matching cup, in a pattern collectors actually want, has sold for $400 and climbed well past $1,000. Broken apart, that same set is worth a fraction of what it was together. Count every piece you have before you decide what any of it is worth, because completeness isn't a small factor here. On glass like this, it might be the whole ball game. Which brings me to the piece almost every single person watching this actually owns and has never once thought to check. A set of plain pressed drinking glasses, no color at all. maybe a simple ribbed pattern, or a light geometric design pressed into the sides. It looks like the single most forgettable glass in the house, the kind you'd grab without even glancing at it, fill with water, and never think about again. But certain early American pressed glass patterns, in complete matching sets of 8 or more, have sold for $300 to $600 simply because a full, undamaged set from that era is getting harder to find with every year that passes. Count how many you actually have that match exactly, down to the pattern, and check the base for any raised design at all, even one so subtle you'd normally miss it completely, probably because you have for years. Here's what ties every one of these together, and it's the same thing I found myself writing down over and over while I was going through this, almost like the glass kept repeating itself. It was never really about the color, or how old something looked, or whether it seemed fancy enough to matter. It came down to 3 things, every single time: the maker's mark, the exact shade of the color, and whether the piece survived complete, with nothing missing. Learn to check those 3 things, and you're not guessing anymore. You're reading the glass the way someone who spent years doing this actually reads it, instead of the way most of us were taught to read it, which is basically not at all. So before that box leaves your house, go back through it one more time. Hold each piece up to real light, not the dim bulb over your sink, and look at what's actually there instead of what you assumed was there. If even one piece in your cabinet turned out to be something you'd have donated for nothing, that's exactly why I make these. Tell me down in the comments what's the oldest glass sitting in your house right now and who it came from, because half the time that story is worth almost as much as the glass itself. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button and turn on notifications, because I've got another one of these coming soon, and you're going to want to be looking at your own cabinet again when it drops.